one and all. My name is RabidRetrospectGames, and I hope everyone has had a safe and enjoyable holiday season. And you know, with 2017's end, I figured it was getting around that time to make one of those end-of-year lists. Now, the 2017 gaming industry was filled with ups and downs, to say the least. But today we're going to be focusing on the good. These are 10 recommendations of games that I personally enjoyed the most during 2017. Now, keep in mind, I didn't play everything that released, and some of these choices are going to lean heavily into my own personal bias. If something you liked wasn't on here, then there's a chance that I still either really liked it and just couldn't fit it on this list, or I didn't play it altogether. These also aren't in-depth reviews. They're just recommendations based on what I personally played and enjoyed during 2017. With that said, I hope you enjoy our top 10 best games of 2017. Let's start this list off with what is perhaps the best bang per buck of the year, Crash Insane Trilogy. This game features complete remasters of the original Crash Bandicoot trilogy from the PlayStation 1 era for the PlayStation 4. As someone that grew up during the early years of 3D gaming, I have a certain nostalgia that this game certainly plays into. I grew up with these games, so of course I have this natural bias towards this particular title. However, I do think these games hold up remarkably well, even ignoring nostalgia. Crash and company are all visually distinctive and have their own charms and quirks that really help make for a colorful cast of characters. The games themselves are challenging, offering up a different type of platforming challenge that we still don't really see to this day. It also sounds great. I personally love the OST of the original Crash games. Plus, it's 3 games crammed together in one box. What's not to love? If you've ever wanted an idea of what early 3D platforming was like, or just want a great game that plays on nostalgia, then I highly recommend Crash Insane Trilogy. Go out, break some boxes, and have a good time. In a year that featured so many releases that will go down inevitably as classics, A Hat in Time is a bit of a sleeper hit. If you were disappointed by Yooka-Laylee, or just want to relive the glory days of GameCube-era platforming, then A Hat in Time might just be worth your time. One of the most charming titles of 2017, A Hat in Time has everything from tight controls with solid platforming, a humorous story, fantastical worlds, and an enjoyable cast of humorous characters. Each world is fairly large with multiple tasks and objectives to complete, and, bonus, not filled with pointless padding or dead empty space. And you can tackle challenges in a very relaxed and casual manner, which is a feature I always appreciate in my collectathon platformer. A Hat in Time is a breath of fresh air in an otherwise near-dead genre, and I eagerly anticipate whatever is next from the developers Gears for Breakfast. The crossover game that I don't think anyone actually asked for? Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle takes the iconic and beloved characters of Nintendo and matches them with those annoying little that stole Rayman's spotlight. This bizarre crossover has resulted in a game featuring XCOM-style gameplay featuring both franchises' characters. Surprisingly, this makes for one of the most addictive and standout titles on an already standout console. The Rabbids add a wonderful touch of charm and humor with their actions, making for some genuinely humorous moments alongside Mario and his compatriots. I still have no earthly idea how this game came together, but I am 100% behind the results. As someone who isn't a big fan of this genre, or at least someone that goes out of their way for tactical games, I think Kingdom Battles hits just the right sweet spot between absurd and serious. It creates some really tense gameplay, but nothing to the degree where I felt like I needed to save every other second. For me, it was just the perfect balance. I certainly hope there are sequels, because I truly believe that this is a goldmine of a crossover, and one that all Switch owners should at least try. In what is increasingly becoming a top 10 Nintendo games of 2017 list, Splatoon 2 manages to snag a spot on this list for being the most consistently fun multiplayer game of 2017. It's a vibrant and beautiful little shooter that receives constant updates, features simplistic yet enthralling gameplay with an emphasis on covering terrain in a variety of colorful paints than simply getting the most kills. They also added a single player, which is not the worst thing ever. Honestly, the multiplayer is the star here, and damn if it doesn't shine bright. Maps are fun to play and in constant rotation, so it never gets too repetitive. There's plenty of weapons and loadouts to try, but that because Ninja Brush for life. Splatoon 2 is a marvelous gem of a game and yet another feather in the cap of Nintendo for 2017. Nier Automata, otherwise known as that game that makes for easy cosplay material, is one of those titles that I am continually surprised exists, but thankful all the same. The original Nier was one of my favorite underappreciated classics of the last console generation. And who knew all it took to make this series more well known was some TNA instead of a weird ogre face bloke. Anyway, this is a game that plays with expectations. Nier Automata is an addictively fun action RPG that isn't afraid to play with what it means to be a video game. Boasting, I think, at least 24 endings, Nier Automata is a game that is meant to be played repeatedly to grasp the full scope. Featuring an absolutely breathtaking score, compelling narrative, fun gameplay, and striking visual design, I do believe Automata will be a game that is examined and looked upon fondly for years to come. Ushering in both the end of the Wii U and the release of the Nintendo Switch, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild reminds everyone, once again, why Nintendo releases can be special. In Nintendo's own take on the more traditional open worlds we've seen from other studios, Breath of the Wild is truly an absolutely gorgeous open sandbox that you're free to explore in whatever way your heart desires. And while it may not be the very best Zelda game ever released, Breath of the Wild is still one of the best open world games released in the last few years. Whether you desire to run straight to the final boss with little to no preparation, or complete the variety of main dungeons, or just want to wander around, Breath of the Wild is a benchmark on what you should be able to do in an open world. You know, nothing I say is really adding anything to what has already been said about this game. My only hope is that Nintendo takes what worked with this game for future Legend of Zeldas, because the open world genre could use more Breath of the Wild. Persona 5 is one of those games that's kind of hard to sell to people that don't already know what it's about. When one of my more casual gaming friends have asked about this game, it's a hard sell going like, yeah, it's a social life simulator featuring a bunch of teenagers trying to change the hearts of wicked people in a bunch of psychologically themed dungeons where you fight demons and recruit them like Pokemon, yeah! It's a bit of a mouthful, but it does work. Persona 5 is an addictive game. The actual turn-based gameplay is fun and fast-paced, with tons of customization based upon which personas you have and who's currently in your party. The world these characters exist in is addictive to explore and learn more about. I mean, it's addictive trying to find just the right schedule of things to do and prioritize in the day-to-day life. Who do you want to romance? Who do you want to get to know better? Do we ignore our previous engagements because we need to beat the palace and stop the bad guy? And having such a wide variety of likable characters makes those choices hard. And me, this game is pretty. I love stylized visuals, so this game was already right up my alley on that alone. And you know what? I love pretty much everything about this game. There were points where I would just spend hours of my day ignoring my own life just to further the life of my character. As far as JRPGs go, this is top tier. You don't get much better than Persona 5. In a year filled with triumphs for Nintendo, Super Mario Odyssey is the proverbial cherry on top. Super Mario Odyssey adds yet another near-perfect game to the Nintendo Switch's already stellar first year. Nintendo is one of the only companies that I know that can take something as silly as a talking hat and make it not only add a layer to Mario's already buttery smooth platforming, but have dozens of other creative uses, like possessing a god T-Rex. And not content with making the bare minimum, Mario Odyssey is probably one of the most dense games I've played this year in terms of content. Each kingdom boasts hours and hours of unique challenges and objectives to complete, ranging from the mundane to the fantastical, rewarding players for exploring every single nook and cranny. The sheer amount of quality content in just one or two of these kingdoms is more than most other full $60 releases provide. And in a year that has already had so many solid games for the Nintendo Switch, Super Mario Odyssey was by far the best game on the Switch, in my opinion, and one of the best games I've ever played, period. Packed with charm and content, Super Mario Odyssey is the single-player game that has continuously brought me back to my Nintendo Switch without fail. An instant classic, Super Mario Odyssey is a game no gamer should go without. Amongst the plethora of standout indie titles, Hollow Knight was a standout among standouts. With a visually captivating 2D art style, Hollow Knight is a beautifully haunting adventure through the ruined bug kingdom of Hallownest. Now, a lot of games get tagged with the whole Souls-like whenever they show an inkling of difficulty, but I do think the term applies perfectly to Hollow Knight. The game rewards knowing how to effectively combat your enemies, as well as knowing how to avoid their assaults. And if, for any reason, you find yourself having difficulty with a certain location or boss, then there are plenty of chances to upgrade yourself via charms or weapon upgrades. This is a game that really understands how to create a challenging yet rewarding gameplay system. The world of Hallownest itself is also filled with so many little fun secrets, lore bits to uncover, bosses to fight, and characters to meet, that it's nearly staggering how much content is available at the very reasonable asking price. Every time I thought I'd discovered everything, something new would pop up. A new secret around the bend, or a new boss hidden in plain sight. In a world where big budget games struggle to provide even a measly few hours of content for $60, Hollow Knight is one hell of a bargain, and my personal favorite indie game of 2017. Resident Evil has always been a series of change. This has led to innovations and all-time classics like the endlessly ported Resident Evil 4, and to some of the more head-scratching entries like Resident Evil 6. Resident Evil 7 is where the series needed to go to stay relevant. Taking place primarily in a destitute estate that harkens back to the series' roots, Resident Evil 7 is Capcom's first mainline series attempt at injecting horror into the FPS genre. I am as pleased as Wesker releasing Ouroboros into the atmosphere to report that Resident Evil 7 forgoes the typical, and feared that they might do, hide-and-seek FPS gameplay that every wannabe Amnesia or Outlast has tried for the last few years, and opts instead for resource management, puzzle solving, and knowing when to pick your battles. The estate is jam-packed with monsters and the now deranged Baker family, who are some of the most terrifying antagonists in the series history. And there's this well-done gradual build From nail-biting terror and being mostly helpless to Goku Ultra Instinct levels of overpowered. Resident Evil 7, for me, scratched that itch that the PT cancellation left behind. And in a year that featured so many quality titles that making this list was extremely difficult, I have to say Resident Evil 7 is my personal favorite game of 2017. This was the perfect kick in the ass that the series was in desperate need for. Resident Evil 7 shows that even a series as long-standing as Resident Evil can still pull off a showstopper of a game, and is my personal game of the year for 2017.